the webinar that is being presented today. My name is Nicky Hardwick. I'm an HR consultant at HRTorQue. I've been here for almost 20 years and been working in the field of HR. So this morning's presentation is going to be on HR New Year's resolutions. And the thought behind it was to try and share with everybody some interesting, takeaways from a survey that Gartner did, but also giving people some insight into what I tend to see working with clients and consulting over very many different industries, different levels of employees, and dealing with a number of problems that we've been, seeing over the last couple of years. So what I would like to do is to go through the various different findings that came out of the survey with Gartner, and then share with you some of the things that we need to be doing as HR professionals as well as leaders. So throughout the presentation, they do talk about HR professionals, but I think that in South Africa and pretty much in any small business who doesn't have an HR department, the leaders and the management, take on the role of HR within the business. So this is not specific to HR professionals, but if you are the HR professionals, this is obviously for you. But I think this can be applied to anybody in a business that is in a position of management, specifically dealing with employees and dealing with how we go about changing the way of work. Because unfortunately, that's one of the things that we need to start doing within this day and age. Okay, so moving swiftly along, what I'll be doing is going through the slides. If anybody has any questions in the Q&A, you're more than welcome to post them, and then we can deal with them afterwards. So as I said before, I've been with HRTorQue and working in the field of human resources for the past 20 years. And just from my perspective, I've noticed that things have changed so dramatically over the last 20 years. I can remember being, newly starting in HR, and from about middle of November to when we came back to work in January, we pretty much had nothing to do. So now that doesn't change. The only time that there's really nothing to do, inverted commas, is the period between Christmas and New Year. Other than that, we are constantly busy working. We're constantly busy doing things. And I think that has gone across to very many different industries. But HR is not the same as it used to be. So in the past, HR departments, were predominantly just a function, almost an administrative function. And their job was to keep charge of records, making sure that the company was compliant. Very often the HR people also handled the payroll. But the job of the HR person was really just to make sure that legal compliance in terms of hours of work, minimum wage, dealing with things like the Provident Fund, the medical aid, that was their sole function. And what has happened specifically over the last 10 years, as many of you will know, software has changed. There's been technological advances. We've got so many different things that we can implement in a business. You look at time and attendance. So we no longer, hopefully, we're no longer manually capturing time and attendance reports. You can monitor where a person is by them using their cell phone. They can check in from anywhere. When we look at onboarding, the systems that we have now, whether very complicated or not, can pretty much onboard an employee for you. So HR is now no longer sitting there and trying to make sure that it is done, or the management. And so we now have programs that automate payroll, and they do all of those kinds of things, even from a training and development perspective. The amount of software and that kind of thing that is out there it can help you identify the skills gaps and what it is that we can do, what training we need to be putting in place. And so the change has become, over the last 10 years, from what it was to what it is now, is so different. So now with this automation, HR now doesn't really focus on managing the personnel and the admin tasks. We now need to start moving into a different place. So even as leaders, so whether, as I said before, whether you have an HR department or you don't, there's almost an expectation that as HR professionals and as well as HR leaders and management, is we now need to start thinking more about the people and how we make the people work as opposed to just ticking boxes. So if we then go and have a look at 2023 outlook, and in as much as we're talking about the 2023 outlook, is what I'm about to present to you today, in my opinion, has actually been coming for a little bit for a while. So often I will consult with clients, and people within their business will have made decisions, they would have done things, they would have behaved differently. And people, particularly since COVID, have started to behave so very differently in the workplace. There's this massive change. And I've been saying for a while that people need to start working differently within the workplace because people have changed. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is based on a survey that Gartner did with more than 800 HR leaders across 60 countries and in various different industries. And what the purpose of the survey was to try and identify what were the priorities of these HR leaders and what did they think that their challenges were for 2023. I've given a little bit of an overview of who Gartner is, but the survey was actually so enlightening, and it gives you a good indication of what it is that HR leaders and management is what we need to be doing in this changing world. So as I go forward, when we look at the top 5 priorities, so I'm going to be going through these in more detail in terms of what are the challenges that HR leaders are reporting, and specifically employees. But the number one priority that they specified in the report is that 60% of HR leaders are prioritizing leader and management effectiveness. Then we come on to organizational design and change management. So 53 are prioritizing that, 53%. Then it goes on to employee experience, then recruiting, and then the future of work. Now, when I have a look and we go more into detail in a lot of these things, for me, there is a core factor that seems to be driving a number of these different factors. And I think it's to do with how the world has changed. So as I go into the presentation, what I'm actually going to start to do is to start with organizational design and change management. Because although the priorities of the HR leaders, are in that order, I think what is driving the need to have these priorities within the business is actually how employees themselves have changed. So when we go into the various different priorities, I'm going to actually start with number 2. Okay, so now we have a look at what is actually driving these priorities. So the first thing, and I think this is what we all know, is inflation is on the increase. Even when we look at employees, we look at management, I think people in general are concerned and are stressed about how do we get to the end of the month. So it's not just the business that is worried about this, it's employees. And so, rising inflation is causing a number of knock-on events. We also then have scarce and expensive talents. So although HRTorQue is not a recruitment agency, we spend a lot of time assisting clients with recruitment, even internal recruitment. And the talent that is out there, firstly, there are a lot of people out there, but finding the people with the right skills, the right, fit with the organization is so difficult. And those that you can find are incredibly expensive. And then we've got global supply constraints. So I know that in a lot of industries, this doesn't necessarily make a difference. But even if we look at the war in Ukraine, that has had a knock-on effect in terms of many, many different businesses. So what is happening overseas is directly affecting what happens in South Africa. Then as management and HR leaders, we have some very real trade-offs that we need to make. And I've seen this in many businesses that I work with, is we have a problem in that we're sitting in a place where we need to do cost saving. So as a business, specifically coming out of COVID, with the rising inflation and a number of those things, as a business, we're focused on saving money. But in the same breath, we need to invest in talent. So now we need to start deciding, where do we spend our money? We want to invest in talent. It's important to invest in talent. However, we need to save money in the same breath. Then we have the business requirements versus the employee needs. And so we're juggling those things constantly, trying to find a happy balance between looking at what the employees need, investing in the talent, versus trying to keep the business going and being profitable. We also then look at what new employees are expecting, from employers nowadays. So I think this is quite a key thing, because one of the things that I'll mention later is that if we always do what we've always done, we're going to get what we've always got. And that's something that is always kind of rung true. However, in this scenario, doing what we've always done is no longer going to work. So people are changing, employees are changing, and specifically coming out of COVID and that sort of thing, the expectation of new employees is different. And what you're able to offer is impacting on how attractive you are. And secondly, is impacting on their need to stay. So people nowadays are wanting to be seen as individuals and not just a number. They're looking for organizations that can offer flexibility. So when I say flexibility, people automatically go to the hybrid work from home place. It's not necessarily that, but they're looking at flexibility within their workplace and going, can my employer accommodate me in the space that I am? They're also looking for shared purposes. They're wanting to know that I'm not just a number here. I'm not just working to the end of the day. They want to feel that they're part of the organization. Another driving factor is employee well-being. So for a very long time, if we go back historically, we had provident funds, we had pension funds, we had medical aid and that sort of thing. That kind of fell off. And now there's a big drive again to start looking at employee well-being. So what can we put in place from an employment perspective? So not necessarily expensive things, but finding things that we can care for our employees. And I think predominantly, if we're looking at what people are looking for, and it will come out more during the presentation, is that individuals and employees are wanting to be engaged in the business. They're wanting to feel like they are a person, that they matter, that their opinions matter. So I'm not talking about having counseling sessions about, how was their day and that sort of thing, but they're not just a number. I think the history in work is that work was very much, there was work and there was home. You came to work, you did your job, and then you went home. There's a big drive at the moment with people and their expectations to say, I'm not just a number. I'm not just a person that comes here and does 1, 2, 3, 4. There are other aspects that I want to be engaged in. I want to have a shared purpose with the organization. I want to feel like I am part of it. So all of these things here are driving the priorities that I've mentioned before, and I'm going to go through these priorities with you now. Okay, so as I mentioned before, I'm starting with organizational design and change management, because in my view, it actually affects all the other priorities. Although it's been listed as the second most important priority, I think the reason underneath here actually speaks so clearly for me into the various different aspects and why those other things are important. So HR managers, in terms of the survey, are reporting that they are finding that employees are fatigued from the years of change. So it's something that is called change fatigue. And I must be honest, I have myself experienced, not for me personally, but I've experienced that within lots of different clients. Now, if we look at what causes change fatigue, we go through, so if we think about the last 10 years, even the last 20 years, you think about where we've come from and the things that have advanced. So we think about technological advances. Technology is moving so quickly that people are having to learn consistently how to do things. So in the workplace, it's not moving year on year. It's just moving so quickly. Then there's the added effect of economic uncertainty. And I think that's very real for everybody. And then political tension. So if we look globally, these are the things that are causing what they call change fatigue. I think further though, if we have to then go more in depth, if we look just at COVID, So throughout the world, specifically, I'm going to talk about South Africa, but COVID had so much change. As a society, we had to very quickly change to a, inverted commas, new normal, where to learn how to live at home, possibly work at home, have children at home, not see family, not be able to go overseas, change how we did shopping, change how we did working, change how we do meetings, change how we interact. So many things, the normal that we had before, so the normal sort of changes of moving really quickly, we now came to a case where we came back to work and some people we haven't seen for months. So there's so many things within COVID, and now we're returning now to normal again. So we almost started getting used to what was happening, going out to the shops with a mask, and then suddenly it was all different. And now, people are constantly having to change. Over and above that, I mean, specifically in South Africa, we have other factors such as the riots and the floods, specifically in KZN, but that also then affected around the province. We've got the war, as I mentioned, in Ukraine. We've got a number of different things overseas. There's so many things that are happening. And for me, as we came out of COVID and people started coming back to work, I've done so many different consults with HR managers, people that I've known for many years, and people are asking the question, why do people behave like this? What has happened? And, change fatigue for me, I keep saying to people are tired. So previously, when it was just work and home, there was almost a pot where I would come to work and I could draw from my pot to say, it's fine, I can deal with these things. And then I would go home, and at home, hopefully, there was a place that I could recharge and I could do those things. But now there's, from every angle that people are coming from, there is constant barrage of things that need to be changed. We are constantly moving. If you have kids, if you have grandkids, the way that things are happening is there's never a time where people can just, it's all stable just for a minute. Now, interestingly, is when we look at change fatigue, that is directly affected. So change fatigue is what they're saying is that if you have somebody who's experiencing above average change fatigue, what is so interesting is that only 43% of people who are experiencing above average change fatigue will choose to stay with their company, which basically means that, the rest of those people that are above average, their choice will be when something comes along to make them leave, they will leave. So we're looking at a huge percentage of people that are experiencing above average fatigue that are going to make a decision, even if they've been somewhere for a very long time, they will make the decision to go somewhere else. So if you look at people that have high skills within your organization, that have been there for a long time, that place huge amounts of value, they will choose to go somewhere else, and you're stuck, having lost a huge amount of, skill, experience, and a number of those other things. The other thing that comes into this as well is that if we look at a hybrid situation, so I know a lot of people have moved to a hybrid situation, but people who have work from home and work in a hybrid situation, 40% of those people report that they have, more work friction events that they have to deal with. So what work friction is it's an event in the workplace that almost causes you to lose motivation. Now, 74% of employees are now reporting that they are experiencing 3 or more work friction reports at work. So they have, 4 points within the work environments in which they are now being affected by issues that are causing them to lose motivation. That brought in with the change fatigue is, as soon as you bring those two together, it causes employees to make the decision to leave. Now, as I said before, people who work from home are reported to be 40% more likely to experience more friction points at work. So if we just look at the last 3 years, and our impact as organizations on our employees is over the last 3 years, when COVID hit, we had the announcement that we all needed to go home. The expectation of a lot of organizations, rightly or wrongly, was we need to push, we need to survive. We were initially supposed to have 3 weeks of lockdown that turned into a lot more, and then certain industries couldn't come back. And so what happened is we pushed our employees, especially those that were skilled, that were good, that were willing. And so we pushed people to change and to evolve into what is this new normal. And we did that to survive, because if we hadn't survived, there wouldn't have been anything to come back with. And so we've constantly, as business, in external, there's all these changes that are happening, but in internal, we have pushed our people to go to different things. We've possibly had to look at how we do business, how we change business, how we evolve into what is this new normal after COVID. And I know now that we've now kind of gone back to what it was, but things are still different. We no longer necessarily have to have online meetings, face-to-face meetings. Things are different. The expectation of people are different. And so we have asked people to quickly and effectively and efficiently change, but never taken into account possibly how that has affected people. And so our expectations have been higher, with very often no consideration to what that has done to the person. And in my view, that has made a huge impact into people saying, I'm actually just done. I can't do this anymore. I have no more to give you. And so people are making decisions to move elsewhere, is to go somewhere that you never thought would make a difference. And so for me, I think this change fatigue and the work friction points are a huge thing that affects how we do business today and how we engage with our employees. Okay, so hopefully I've given that enough insight for you. But I think for me, that element of employees, and we'll go into the third one just now, that element is driving now what people are wanting from the workplace. So what people want from us in the work environment. Okay, so moving then into leader and management's effectiveness, is the work environment, as I've mentioned, is changing, okay? But very often leadership, or at least based on the survey, is HR professionals are saying that leadership is not changing. So leadership is still much in the old way of working, which is, it's very top down, it's very work is work. I give you an instruction, you follow my instruction, and that is how it has always been, is we will come to the workplace, we will address work needs, we don't look at any personal stuff. And again, I'm not saying that we need to now become counselors and we need to now start thinking about all bits and pieces of everybody's lives, but the reality is that just making the assumption that personal is personal and it doesn't come in here is no longer what is happening. People are, as we've said, people are stressed, and what affects from a home perspective comes to work. And if people are not feeling that when I come to work, that there is empathy, that there's genuine caring, that there's an ability for me to not necessarily have to fit into that mold, but be able to have a bit of freedom, people are choosing to go elsewhere. So as leaders, leaders need to start changing how they are dealing with their employees. So some of the things that are affecting this relationship is social and political turbulence, work-life fusion. So as I mentioned before, it is not just a break any longer. It's not you're at work, now you're at home. It's very different. Now it is all part of the same thing, allowing people flexible work arrangements. And I'll give you an example of how this changed. So when we were all in COVID, people were able to work from home. I get that it didn't happen with everybody, but there is an ability, and we now know that there is an ability for people to work from home. And so often, I'll get a query from a client in which they'll say, the school holidays have arrived and Sarah wants to know, can she work from home, I don't know, for 3 days or 2 days? The school is closed for that one day. Can she work from home? And the immediate response of the employer is no, she must come to work. And I'm not saying right or wrong, but my question is why does she need to come to work? Well, because she needs to come to work. Her job is an office position and she has to come to work. I said, no, I understand that. But why does she have to? You're just making a statement here. Is there not something that we can look around, that we can support both the employee? Granted, if she doesn't do her work, that's a separate thing. But is there not something? Let's look at how we can change things. How it was is not necessarily how it needs to work now. And so these things are now starting to create where we're looking at, instead of having a leader-employee dynamic, we now need to go human-to-human relationship. So what this is calling for is that people start seeing the people. So as leaders, we need to remember, and I've said this now before, is that people want to be seen not as a number, not just as a cog in the wheel of this machine that we call work, but actually as a person. I have views, I have things that I can contribute. I have things that I can maybe tell you how to do things differently. I want to be involved in those things. And as leaders, we need to move from going, you will do as you're told, you will do when I tell you to do it, and don't want to change things. Don't come in and step outside your pay grade, because that's not what we do. So we now need to start moving to different types of things. We need to possibly look at, looking at different ways of working. Not everybody works the same. So we need to start thinking outside of the box. Not everything is going to be the same as it was. Okay, then we look at the employee experience. So this was number 3 in terms of the priorities that HR leaders had. And so this was driven by people leaving and the reasons for people leaving. So I found this quite interesting. So some of the 3 reasons why people are leaving is, one is better compensation. So obviously everybody wants more, but interestingly is the other 2, which people are leaving at the similar rates for either of these 2, is better professional development opportunities and better career trajectories. So better compensation is not number 1 in these 3. The other 2 are equal or similar to better compensation, which is basically telling us is that people are not just after, I go to work, excuse me, I go to work, I do a job, I go home. People are looking at, how do I better myself? How do I become better? How do I look at what I'm doing with my life? Is it meaningful? What is it that I want to do? So it's a very different dynamic to what it used to be. What is also interesting is that the survey also showed that 1 in 4 employees in an organization, so those that were surveyed, were confident about their career at the organization that they were. And 3 out of 4 people were looking for a new role in external organizations. So if we just look at this, it's basically just saying to us that employees are expecting something different. They're not just coming to work to do a job. I granted there's probably a lot, but a lot of the employees are coming to work to make a difference. They want to be involved in something that they feel like they have a say in. They want to have a common purpose with their employer. They want to know that they are valued. They're not just there for the paycheck. Again, I'm talking in general, so this is based on a survey. It won't be everybody. Not everybody is like this, but very often the people who are valued, the people that you want to retain, the people that are like that, very often will fall into this category. Okay. Then if we have a look at recruiting, so as I mentioned before, recruiting is obviously, for me, because I get involved in a lot of recruiting, I found it incredibly difficult in the last couple of years to find good quality people. The people that you can find very often don't have the skills that you need, but are requiring, unreasonable salaries that don't marry. And so you're continually looking for the people, but not having the ability. So either people don't have the skills, they don't have the experience. People are coming into the workplace, even having worked elsewhere, but don't have the required maybe level that you're looking for, but are expecting huge benefits, huge salaries, and marrying the 2 up with the people that you currently have is incredibly difficult. So the talent supply is very low in traditional recruiting pools. So going to where we normally would go, as in the past, is becoming very, very difficult. Then the other reality is that attrition of staff in our new normal, so the hybrid and the remote working environments, is quite high. So as we sit at the moment, we've come to the new normal, but the ability of people now to work in a hybrid and remote situation allows the world of recruitment to become much bigger. So I know of people who actually are living in South Africa but working abroad, but they sit here and they work from South Africa for the UK or whatever. So you can pretty much be, because we've now realized that we can work in a remote scenario, you don't actually have to go to the office. There's numbers of people that I'm aware of that actually never go into the office. They never see their co-workers other than online. And so the reality is that if I have the ability to work from my house anywhere in the world, people now have the ability to then leave. And the attrition of staff in this new normal is much higher than it used to be. The third reality is that even when we get to candidates, so if we get to recruitment and candidates in this space, is that those candidates are, one, much harder to attract, and secondly, is harder to convert into an employee. And so we're sitting again in the position where it is so hard to find those people. We're losing people. So going back to the change management, is we're losing our good people and we're unable to find other people. And so what do we do? Okay. Then if we look at the future of work, okay, so I think, again, this also talks into how leaders need to be changing, how we need to be changing as HR professionals, and what we need to be doing in the workplace. So today's context is, if we just look at how we plan for workplaces, and the place that we used to be in is so very different to what it is now. So just the statement at the top is workforce planning is disconnected from today's reality. Okay, so the belief is if we look at skills, is historically we were able to predict what future skills we needed. The statement is we can access enough talent to fill our gaps. We know that that's not a case. We cannot predict the future skills that we're needing because those are changing constantly. We can't find the skills. And so we're having to look at different ways of doing things. The other thing is that we can fill future talent gaps primarily through buying and building of people. That is not the case anymore. And then the other one that I think, again, this is the important one, is the shift in the employer-employee dynamic, is that we as employers, used to hold the power to dictate when, where, and how employees work. That is no longer the case. The shift is changing now, where people are going, that's not the case. I have the ability to decide and to make decisions. So as an example, you could have someone who has worked for your organization for a very long time. Prior to COVID, everybody used to come to the office. It was the way things were done. And so that was how we happened. Then everybody realized we could work from home. COVID then, inverted commas, finished, and we now had the ability to bring everybody back. And so the instruction was given, you now will all come back to work. And what I found happening is people then said, no, I'm not going to come back to work. I don't want to come back to work. I don't want to incur the cost of, I'm used to now 2 years of not having to incur the cost to come to work. Over and above that, I spend an hour let's assume if you're in Joburg, it could be much longer. I spend an hour in my car on the way to work and an hour back. Working from home, I have the ability to spend more time with my kids. I have the ability to have more me time where I can now de-stress or whatever, or I can actually spend longer doing my work, so I'm more productive when I'm at home. I don't want to come back to the office. And if employers have pushed it, obviously not with every position. If employers have pushed it, those people have then said, okay, fine, then I'll go somewhere else. And there are other clients, or not clients, there are other organizations that are willing to accept that are willing to say, yes, fine, you can. And so we are no longer in the position where we can dictate that. It's not, we have to start being a little bit more flexible. And so these are the challenges that we're having. So in terms of the priorities that I've mentioned, this is in terms of the survey, what has come out. And I know that it's just a survey, but for me, this speaks so much into the things that we've been experiencing in the last 3 years and dealing with people and how people are engaged with their employers, how people are demanding different things, are asking for different things, even from a work perspective in terms of what people can do and how they do it. There's just such a big shift in the expectation of employees in the workplace. And for me, if we don't move, if we don't start changing and expecting our managers to change and expecting our leaders to change, as organizations, we are going to get stuck, because this is changing whether we like it or not. And if we don't deal with these things as employers, we are going to be left in the dark ages. You either need to move and change, or you're going to battle with the people, specifically, again, your skilled people, the people that you're wanting to retain. These are the things that you are going to struggle with. Okay, so then if we have a look at where to from here. So I have mentioned some of these things before, but where to from here? So specifically with leaders and management, managers need to start embracing the new way of working. And as HR and as management, we need to start supporting managers to move to a more human-centric approach. And I know that people will then say, yeah, but we're now making it all soft. We're now listening to everybody's problems. We now, this is work. This is what is supposed to be work. The reality is that if we don't move, we're going to get left behind. So in my view, and again, I'm going to go back to the example of the person who asked, well, can I for the one day work from home? My question is that our history, our people, the way people would work is the immediate response is no. My statement is that as leaders, as HR managers, the question needs to be asked why. Why no? Have you considered that there's other things? And as you start to consider there's other ways of doing things, there's different means. You can't just say no. So prior to COVID, nobody had ever done it. Well, very few people had ever done it, but we didn't know that you could work from home. We didn't know that we could all go home and all continue to work, hopefully successfully. Obviously, within certain positions, we could do it. So when you now say no to your employee, an out and out no, they are questioning why. You're not even seeing me as that individual. You're just seeing a job, a thing that needs to be done. You don't see the challenges that I'm having, sorting out my kids, or there's a big problem on the freeway, or whatever. The immediate answer is no. And people are starting to say, but why? If I can do what I can do from wherever, if I can do things differently, if I can use this piece of software as opposed to that, if I can, just change, why can't I? And so as leaders and management, as HR professionals, as management, we need to start supporting our leaders to start moving to a more human-centric approach, is to start seeing the people, so as to start accepting and embracing, and again, I've inverted commas said, the person. So stop seeing just the work, just the widget that is now making sure that things are being done, and start seeing the person. There are people, there is labor within our environment, people that have experienced things that we've experienced over the last couple of years, and they're coming to work with those things. Those people that you're expecting to do a whole lot of things for you, they have things behind. And if we don't start supporting people and making sure that when they come to work, they feel supported and that kind of thing, we are going to lose those people to another organization that possibly will. And so the one thing that we need to do is to support our managers, is to start pushing for a different way of working in terms of our leaders and how they work with their staff, is to start asking the question, how can you do things differently? Okay. Then when we look at organizational design and change management, is we need to, as organizations, start decreasing change fatigue in the workplace. Now, how they're suggesting that happens is we need to start changing from a leader top-down approach and start creating a space where employees are not just told what to do, but are active participants in things like decision making. They are part of the implementation. So they are part of the change, and then in discussing the change, so if there's changes that are going to be happening, we don't just tell everybody, we discuss, we talk. I'm not specifically saying that we need to negotiate and change, not change, we need to negotiate everything, but it's a more collaborative approach of sitting down and saying, you know, what do you guys think? Do you think we can do things differently? Do you think that we could implement this? Okay, you've got a good idea of implementing this. How do you think we can do it? And then let people be in charge of doing that, obviously with support and helping them do that. That starts to decrease the change fatigue, because they are part of an open environment where they are active participants, where they are there. And again, I want to, say this is not, it won't work with everybody, but this is specifically aimed at the people who want to be there, the people who want to work, the people who have always been there, and even people that are coming into your organization. Is this approach here of a sort of open strategy helps to retain the people that are within your organization. Okay. Then we get to the employee experience, and everything that I'm saying, I think, speaks quite greatly into the employee experience, is that employees are asking for the ability to have more career opportunities within your organization. Now, when I say that, is that historically, possibly the sharing of how do you get from point A to point B. Now, that has possibly not been done very well, especially in small and medium-sized businesses. People kind of just progress through the organization, but the people over here or in that department, they don't know how do they get from that point to that point. All that they can see is their one particular department, and when they look at their department, there may be only one place that they can go. There's only so many skills that they can learn. There's no opportunity for them to do anything. And so what they're looking at is saying that as an organization, you need to start creating a better understanding of career opportunities within the business. So it's explaining to people, how do you get from point A to point B? What do you do? What is point A and what point B? Is there a point C? Are there different opportunities? I know you're in this department, but there's also these other departments where you could possibly move. This is not just about you came into, for example, HR. There's other departments that you could go to. You're not just stuck there. And sharing with people what their trajectory could look like. But then in the same breath is also creating channels where an individual can objectively assess their career fit. They can look at going, I really, really want to go into HR as an example. And then you have an opportunity to explain to them what is HR. I'm using HR as an example. What does HR look like? And chatting to them through things like, how would you cope with having a hard conversation with someone? How would you cope with possibly dismissing someone? Do you think that you could do that? Maybe HR is not for you. Have you considered possibly, I don't know, whatever. But is giving people the opportunity to look at what is out there, to look at how they can develop themselves, but then also objectively assess, am I going in the right direction? Am I moving where I need to be doing? Historically, all of that sort of sat possibly with management, possibly with HR. And it was only really shared, possibly there's a job on a bulletin board for a new position, but people didn't know, well, they're asking for this and this and this. I don't even know how to get to that. I don't know what I need to do if that is my plan. How do I get from that point to that point? And so in terms of trying to retain people and keep people, new people, current people, is we need to start being more open about what does it all look like. Then if we look at recruiting, so looking at recruiting, one of the things that we need to start doing excuse me, is rethinking traditional recruiting methods. Now, we don't necessarily need to stop the way that we're doing things, but we need to start, thinking about where are we going to find these people. We need to find accessible people, not just people that are available. We need to possibly look at things like alternative skills. So if we have a particular job that we can't find the skills for that job, is it possible to have maybe two people, I don't know, at a low level to do that job? Do we need a slightly different skill? I need, for example, I don't know, a manager in a particular thing. So we've historically always said, well, you must have this, and you must have this, and you must have these things. Can we possibly look at saying, well, maybe we don't need those things. Maybe if we ask for this or this or this, we can find what we need from what is available. We also then need to have a look at how we're classifying our requirements. So historically, we've said these are the things that you must have, but by doing that, we're excluding a number of different people that possibly would be good. The labor market and the talent pool is, very thin. And like and in my experience, there's very few people out there, and they cost a lot of money. And so if I'm going to find people, I need to now go, well, maybe I need to be looking elsewhere. The other thing, which is quite a nice thing as well, is to look at your internal resources, not specifically, again, just going, there's a normal progression. You'll come in, you start in this position, then you move to this, then you move to this, then you move to this. Is looking around in your organization and identifying other people who possibly outside of a particular department, but that person possibly has skills. Not necessarily skills, but has the abilities and the drive or whatever, that might be a good person to upskill and develop. And taking people from within so that you're developing your own pool within your organization of possibly upskilling, as opposed to always looking outside, because outside is not necessarily the best option anymore. But maybe you're looking at a receptionist and saying, yes, she could be the receptionist forever. She's not going to apply for other positions because maybe she doesn't see that she has the ability. But looking at her position and looking at who she is and saying maybe she would be suitable for that, and then taking that person and upskilling them. So I think when we look at recruiting, that is a key aspect of trying to help you to find the people that you're looking for. And then finally, I think for me is, and it speaks into a number of different things, but that saying of doing what we've always done is no longer going to get us what we've always got. The way that we've done it, the way that we've positioned things, the way that we've managed people is not going to always give us the success that we've had in the past. What is gone is gone. It is different. We need to now, as managers and leaders, we have to think differently. We have to start embracing change. We have to think of people as people. We have to look at the human being that is in front of us and engage with the human being, as opposed to just treating the person as a thing, as part of this work. Work and home, work and personal is no longer completely segregated. As HR professionals and as leaders, we have to be open to new ways of working, and start reinventing how we do things. And in that in reinventing of how we do things is we need to start reinventing how we're dealing with our people, how we're asking them to engage, opening up conversations and starting to find different ways. It has for me over the last 3 years, been so clear of the fact that things need to change. We need to be more empathetic. We need to bring our people. Otherwise, we're not going to, it's not going to work. The way that work was done is not going to happen. So as leaders, we need to do things differently. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. If anybody would like to send me an email afterwards of things that if you're looking at things for training, if you're looking at ways that we can do things within your organization to assist you, you're more than welcome to email me. My email address is nicky@hrtorq.co.za. That's NICKY. at HRTorQue.co.za. And then shortly after this, this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. And then if you do have a problem accessing it, you can always email us as well. I hope that you've enjoyed the presentation today, and I hope it gives you some good insight in terms of going forward into 2023. I look forward to hearing from you, and I look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you, everybody.